The Overwhelmed Brain is a proud member of the Healing Broadcast Network. Are you annoyed by affirmations? When someone says to you, "Think positively," do you say, "I'll be back"? If affirmations feel like lies and positive thinking feels like denial, then get ready to start creating the life you've always wanted now. Hello, this is Paul Coliani, host of The Overwhelmed Brain, the personal growth show for the critical thinker. On every episode, we'll talk about practical, down-to-earth steps to help you improve your mood and keep you sane in this powerful journey we call life. I want to help you bridge the gap between your emotions and reason, causing you to discover why you do the things you do and what you can do to reach higher levels of happiness and lower levels of stress and overwhelm. My ultimate goal is to help you become empowered so that you can create the life you want. Today's quote is by John Bevere, and it's this: "An offended heart is the breeding ground of deception." I chose this quote because I felt a little funny about today's sponsor, which I'll mention shortly, because the person who sponsored the show today is someone close to me. I thought, would it be deceptive to tell the listeners that today's sponsor is my girlfriend? How would that come across? I thought it might be seen as strange or at least a little unusual, so I thought of concealing the fact that today's sponsor is indeed my girlfriend. Now, I talked about this with her and said, I can't tell people you're my girlfriend because it won't look professional. But my girlfriend reminded me of something very important. She said, you're supposed to be someone of integrity. This is what you teach. And here you are trying to deceive those who listen and trust what you say. Now, this hit home pretty hard, but it was exactly what I needed to hear as a reminder of practicing what I preach, which is authenticity. Being authentic means placing integrity before fear. The fear I had was thinking that it was a bad idea to tell you to contact my girlfriend to get legal insurance, and that by doing so, it makes me look salesy and focused more on money than on helping you learn, grow, and heal. Well, after we talked, I realized that integrity is more important than my own fear of what you may think of me. And on top of that, I thought about how much worse it would be if I decided to deceive and then got found out. So I asked myself, do I place a lot of value on the judgments of others? And my answer was no, unless what they're saying is true. And that's when judgment hurts the most, when you believe what's being said about you. When you don't believe it, it's easy. When deep down you do believe that it might be a little true, you feel hurt and exposed. So I made a decision. I chose to avoid feeling hurt and exposed by just coming out and exposing myself on purpose in front of you. At least exposing my thoughts, actions, and intentions. I would rather you despise me because of the truth than love me based on lies. This means that I won't lie. Instead, I'll share with you exactly what my intentions are and what I have to gain from them. My intentions are to keep the show funded and keep it free. So there you go. There's my admission. We are the sum of what we say and how we behave, which results in how people are affected by us. And when all those parts add up to a whole, who are you? I didn't like who I was becoming when I thought about being sneaky, about not mentioning that my girlfriend is the sponsor. This was an old program running in the back of my mind that it's not good to show everyone what's behind the curtains. But why not? In my relationships, I could never get too close to the person I was with if they weren't being honest with me. Whether it was platonic or romantic, if I felt the other person was wearing a mask or being deceptive in any way, I distanced myself as far as I needed to feel safe. This knowing that something was wrong or different in the relationship, but not knowing there was a deception or hidden truth taking place, it made me realize that the best approach is always the one of integrity. As long as I am in integrity, any judgments or criticisms against me can be met with the statement, hey, I'm doing the best I can with the resources I have. This feels good when I say this, with all honesty. If you truly know that you're doing the best you can, then it doesn't matter what anyone else says because you're doing the best you can. It doesn't mean you won't do better next time. It just means at this time, right now, you're doing the best you can. You can choose to lie, then cover the lies with more lies, but you'll find your life going downhill in different ways that you can't even imagine. Or you can choose a route of integrity and find that there's really nothing to hide. Authenticity comes as a result of nothing to hide. When you reach that place, the chips will fall as they may, but your conscience will be clear. Deception leads to conflict, which leads to bad feelings inside, which leads to being a victim of the circumstances that you created beforehand by being deceptive in the first place. But deciding not to deceive is a powerful step in the right direction. Acting from a place of integrity will offend some people for sure because it's really honest, and we all know how some people handle honesty. But at least they'll know that they can count on you, even if it means that you're telling them something they don't like. I appreciate you giving me the space to talk about this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you about today's sponsor. All right, today's sponsor is Asha, who is someone that will help you decide if legal insurance is right for you. Asha works with Legal Shield to give you the best rate to a team of excellent attorneys for like $20 a month. So that's a huge difference than paying a single attorney hundreds or even thousands of dollars, especially because this team wants to give you fast and quality service. What that means for you is that if you're in a situation where you feel like you're getting bullied or you have an ex that just won't quit sending you paperwork or battling you for custody or money, or if you're dealing with an insurance company that refuses to see your side of things, or whatever the legal mess that's blossoming around you, Asha will teach you about this incredible resource that you may need to help you get out of the mess. You don't have to pay to talk with her. She doesn't ask for money. She just answers your questions and lets you know if this legal insurance will work for you. Protect you and your family and contact Asha today. Make sure to head over to theoverwhelmedbrain.com and click on the Get Out of the Legal Mess button. That's where you'll be sent directly to Asha's personal Legal Shield page. Or you can visit getoutofthemess.com, which does the same thing. But if you want an even more direct method, just give her a call at 678-355-8777. You win either way because consultation with her is always free and well worth every minute of your time. This next segment is called Ask Paul. I get your letters almost every day, and I do my best to answer them as timely as possible, sometimes through email and sometimes through this show. So if you want to send me a question, go ahead and send it to paul@theoverwhelmedbrain.com. All right, here we go. Hi, Paul. I was listening to your podcast on codependency. Once you're aware of your tendencies to rescue and the reasons that you do it, going back to childhood, does this lead you to healthier relationships in the future? All right, thank you so much for that question. In case you don't know, codependency is where one person supports the other person's dysfunction. For example, if you live with an alcoholic and you want them to stop drinking, yet they insist that you go to the store and get them some alcohol, and you do that, even reluctantly, you're supporting them and enabling or allowing their dysfunction to continue. Codependent relationships require one dysfunctional person with needs and another dysfunctional person to fulfill those needs. My mom enabled her husband, my stepfather, his drinking and his abuse and other behaviors by making things okay after he made them not okay. For example, when he would throw his drink across the room and the glass would smash into millions of tiny shards, she would clean it up. This told him that when he smashed his glass, he wouldn't be accountable and wouldn't have to clean it up. That encouraged further bad behavior. Another example is when he fell on the floor and wouldn't wake up. She would call the ambulance to take him to the hospital. And this showed him that no matter what state he got in and no matter how bad it got, someone would be there to make sure he was okay. Again, this removes accountability and denies him responsibility. Now, a quick side story. When he finally moved out of the house, it didn't take long for him to realize that he had no idea how to take care of himself. So soon, he was begging to come back home. My mom, thank God, said no. But if he had asked within a month and a half, she might have said yes, because as soon as he left, she still thought that, if he decided to come back, I probably would say yes. But about a month and a half after he left, she came to her senses. Now, this is what happens when you're in a codependent relationship. You don't realize that you are enabling or allowing or supporting the other person's dysfunction even after they leave. In fact, sometimes when they leave, you still have a draw or a need to want to support someone else, to want to support that person specifically, because they fulfilled a need in you. But what you didn't realize was that need being fulfilled was a need for maybe significance, and you felt significant getting abused. And that may be hard to take, but that's what was happening. When you feel significant getting abused, you're in a bad space. So you don't want to be in that space. And you may not even know you're in that space when you're in it. You just feel like, oh, this relationship is terrible, but I have to do X, Y, Z because I can't do anything else. Or whatever thoughts are going through your mind. Codependency is almost like an illness. It's a sickness because you get into a state of feeling significant for the wrong reasons and attaching significance and love and attention and connection to the wrong things. So when they leave, it's almost like your connection has left, like the love you felt left, or when you leave, either way. So something else that happens when the codependent person or the enabling person leaves the situation, it breaks the bond in the sense that it wasn't necessarily a healthy bond, but it was a bond in the way where I function when they're around and they function when I'm around. I call it dysfunction. Some people call it function. But the problem is the one with the most dysfunction actually never learns to be responsible for him or herself because someone is always there to clean up the mess. And if your function is to clean up someone else's messes, and I'm talking about in a relationship, not in a job, not in a situation where someone can't take care of themselves, but someone who actually is physically capable and intelligent enough and has the capacity enough to take care of themselves, but because they do something to become incapacitated and you're there to clean up the mess, That is completely unhealthy. So anyway, that's what I wanted to explain about codependency. And let me read you my response, because I did respond to this listener via email. Here's what I wrote. Yes, absolutely. Once you're aware of your tendencies to rescue people and all the reasons you do it, tracing back to childhood, it does and can lead you to healthier relationships in the future. You just have to stay conscious of your decision-making process. Meaning, when you meet people and you instantly feel the need to be a rescuer or help them in some way, you just want to be clear on your own motives. If you want to help them move out of their house, for example, because you feel that they're helpless and can't do it on their own, causing an excess of compassion to kick in, that could indicate a codependency forming, a codependency or a dependency. If you want to be helpful to them because you know they could do something on their own, but you just want to be nice, that's completely different. I think you just have to watch for a couple warning signs. There's a big difference between someone who says, I just lost my job, but I don't care what it takes. I'm going to get another one. And I just lost my job. This always happens to me. I hope I get another one. I wish life wasn't so hard. Both of these perspectives can come from a healthy person for sure, but usually you'll find the person who embraces their victimhood is the one who really enjoys saviors. They want someone to rescue them. When their savior comes to the rescue, they don't have to worry so much about, say, getting another job. I'm not saying that all of us don't need a savior every now and then, but dysfunctional, very dependent people who are needy and sort of helpless a lot tend to need a savior all the time. This is just one example, but you get the idea. When you find functional, independent people, you won't have to rescue them. It's a matter of turning down your compassion a bit, because in the past, it's been on overdrive, causing you to get into those predicaments. And then just approach people a little more cautiously. I look at it this way. I like to be with people that love to share life with me and not necessarily depend on me to meet their own inadequacies or dysfunctions. Now, just a side note here. I talked about how one of the factors of love and support is meeting each other's needs and wants. This can be and is a healthy relationship as long as you're not meeting their dysfunctional needs. There's a difference between meeting a want or a need that leads to happiness and fulfillment for both people and meeting a need that leads to resentment from one person. That is one of the indications of an unhealthy codependent relationship. Now, dysfunctions can go away and unhealthy dependencies can decrease over time in some relationships, indicating that the relationship is healing and evolving. But it involves lots of trust for each other, and whatever dependencies you're fulfilling for each other should be boosting one another, not draining one of you and boosting the other. Hope that makes sense. Thanks for your letter. So that was my response to that letter writer. This show isn't so much about codependency today, but I did want to answer that. It was a quick one and just give you a reminder of how unhealthy a codependent relationship is. Now, I know this from firsthand experience because I've been in several. I was the dependent one. I was so highly dependent on my girlfriend or my wife to fulfill my dysfunctional needs. And I made it an unhealthy situation. I made it a bad situation. I wasn't addicted to drugs or drinking or anything like that, but there are other small ways to create a codependency. And you usually have one enabler, and that enabler allows the other person to be who they are by cleaning up their messes or taking up the slack. That's tough because one person feels great. You know, if I'm the one with the most dysfunction and the other person is taking up the slack for that dysfunction, then I'm getting along just fine. I'm at peace. Everything, all my needs are taken care of. Everything is wonderful. But the other person is building resentment, is building anger. And that's a place you don't want to be. You need more balance, more equality for a happier, more satisfying relationship. So that's my talk on codependency today. And since we have time, here's another email that I received that I'd like to read to you, and then I'll answer on the air. Hi, Paul. Thank you for covering masculinity. This subject hit home pretty hard. I left a long-term relationship a few years ago, and now I'm in another, quote, relationship. I grew up with a very protective mother and a non-assertive father who wasn't the ideal male role model of, quote, being a man. My mom would typically answer my questions and guide me through challenges. Just wondering what work you could recommend to becoming a more masculine man. Thanks for any advice that you may be able to provide. Bill. That's not his real name because I call everyone Bill. All right, I'm going to talk about masculinity and femininity. Now, I have an episode on this a while back, and I'll reference it a little later, but we all have masculine and feminine aspects inside of us. Masculine consists of being action-oriented, logical, having emotional strength and standing up for what's right. You honor your values and personal boundaries, and you make and enforce rules and take chances. You have overall leadership abilities, and you also seek the receptive and calming nature of the feminine for balance. Now, feminine is more receptive and nurturing, more in touch with emotions, and open to giving and receiving from the heart. The feminine nature is also passive and indirect, but also compassionate and caring. And those with more of a feminine nature seek the strength and security of the masculine for balance. Again, we all have both aspects inside of us. Now, men don't always naturally have more masculine traits, just like women don't always naturally have feminine traits. It really depends on what you've learned to embrace throughout your life. When I was growing up, I tended to embrace more of the feminine aspect of my personality. And what that meant is I wasn't aggressive. I was very passive, or actually I was passive aggressive if you want to count that. And that's a very passive way of being. But I developed a passive way of being because of my upbringing. I was always afraid of what the alcoholic would do in my family, so I became very passive and neutral and tried to keep things calm and mediated. And that, took away my assertion and any type of strength of will that I could have had I adopted a more masculine aspect. So your upbringing really does help you define whether you're going to have a more masculine or feminine aspect of your personality as the dominant characteristic. Now, in relationships, this is where it gets interesting. Almost always, a loving, intimate, healthy relationship becomes balanced when there's an equal balance of the masculine and the feminine. Again, the man doesn't have to play the masculine and the woman doesn't have to play the feminine. This could be two men and two women both taking on one of the roles. And in a heterosexual relationship, it could be the man taking on the feminine and the woman taking on the masculine. It really doesn't matter as long as they complement each other and don't complement each other's dysfunction. And we'll get to that in a minute. Now, masculine doesn't mean dominating and controlling, but that is an exaggerated aspect of masculinity. Feminine doesn't have to mean submissive and getting walked on, but that is an exaggerated aspect of femininity. So the question is, what role do you play? Now, if you're by yourself, you're single, how are you around friends? Do you side more towards one than the other? Do you side more towards friends that are more feminine or more masculine? Friends typically up with those who are like them. If you're more masculine, you probably attract and appreciate masculine friends. Same goes for feminine. Now with romantic partners, lovers, they typically end up with those that play more of the opposite role, and it creates a stronger attraction when it's dichotomous like that. A feminine person is usually more attracted to a masculine person, and vice versa. But here's where that can be a problem. A relationship can start off complementary, but end up getting worse and worse over time. I'm going to use the example of a typical heterosexual relationship, whatever typical means. You have a man and a woman, and this scenario could mean that the man plays a more masculine role and the woman plays a more feminine role. And as long as they're comfortable with each other's roles and their own roles, things can go along fine. There can be other challenges that arise, but usually when the roles are accepted, the relationship moves along more smoothly. Now, the roles can start off as desirable. You could have the man that's more masculine and the woman that's more feminine, but things can go awry when one wants to embrace one aspect over another. For example, a woman meets a, quote, nice guy, where he has a lot of feminine qualities that she likes. But when he never shows his more masculine side, she may start to feel less feminine because she has to take on the masculine aspects that he lacks. Now, this can lead to the breakdown of the relationship, and they won't even know why. In my marriage, I took on a more feminine role, and this prevented my wife from being able to take on that same role. She wanted to feel like a woman, and she could not access her full femininity because I was taking on that role. I was a very passive, what she called little boy, which is also a feminine aspect, that childlike behavior. I would say things like, hey, do you mind if I eat dinner now? Is that okay with you? I would ask for permission on things. And even in intimate situations, would you mind if I did this to you? I mean, it came from a perspective of a scared little child, and that's a very feminine role. And when you're with a woman who wants to be feminine, wants to feel like a woman, then if you're a man, you need to take on a more masculine role if you want this relationship to work out. Again, this is one example. There's many variations of this example, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. The problem is when you're both fighting for that aspect, if you're both fighting for the feminine role, it can lead to the breakdown of the relationship, and neither one of you will know why. Same-sex relationships are almost always the same way as the heterosexual ones, in the sense that one will take on the masculine and one will take on the feminine. At least that's what happens when things are going smooth. These roles complement each other, and when the couple is both comfortable embracing those aspects of themselves, everything can go much smoother. Those roles complement each other as long as the couple is comfortable embracing those aspects of themselves. I've seen relationships break down because the roles were unwillingly reversed, at least by one partner. Let's talk about me again. I've always sought strong, masculine women because I tended to embrace my feminine side more often. I don't mean bulky and muscular. I just mean someone who's very independent, very strong-willed, maybe owns her own business, because I was usually passive and more compassionate, more emotional, and typically afraid of confrontation. I was the best mediator, but the worst action taker. Most of the women in my life left because they wanted to embrace my masculinity to make them feel, and this is important, to make them feel, quote, like a woman. And all I mean by that is they wanted to feel like a woman. And really what that means is they wanted to embrace their femininity. And doing so meant that I needed to meet their needs of the masculine aspect. I need to become the masculine energy that they needed in their life so they can feel safe around me, so they can feel protected. And I mean, these are just deeper level needs. There's other things going on here. But so as long as I was embracing the masculine side of me and not showing up in the relationship as a little boy or even a little girl, I'm not coming from a place of fear. I'm coming from a place of strength. See, the women in my life got to know me and like the feminine side of me. But after a few years went by and the masculine side rarely showed itself, it made them feel like they had to play the role. They had to take on the masculine role. And when you have a partner that wants to feel comfortable being themselves, but you can't complement that aspect of them, you'll see the relationship disintegrate. When I was married, my wife loved this aspect of me. I mean, how many men can cry at the same movies as they do? I mean, there's that and other things that happened as well, but she liked this about me at first. But when I never embraced my masculinity, she never felt safe enough to be the woman she wanted to be. And when my wife called me a little boy that day, that was the day I realized something needed to change in me. Now, I'm talking to the letter writer here to answer his question on how he can be more masculine, how he can become more masculine in his personality, in his life, so that he's not stuck where he is. He probably feels like he can't stand up for himself or confront situations or be assertive and honor his boundaries. So whether you're a man or a woman and you want to embrace more of your feminine or more of your masculine, just follow along and take what you can from the advice I offer him. Coming up next. First of all, there are steps to follow to become more masculine or more feminine, but it will take some masculinity to do them because it involves taking action. Let me repeat that because it's important. The steps to become more masculine or more feminine will take some masculinity to do because the steps involve taking action, which is a masculine trait. So first, don't be afraid to stand up for what you feel is right. It doesn't mean you stand up in front of a gunman to take the hit, but it can mean that when you feel your personal boundaries are being violated, or even worse, when your emotions are being invalidated, say that. And use I feel statements to convey how you feel. Honoring yourself means standing up for you. I feel disrespected when you say that. Or I feel hurt when you say that about me. Another I feel like you hate me when you do that. All of these statements are conveying what's going on inside of you and keeping you out of focusing on accusing the other person. This is truly standing up for yourself, because as soon as you focus on accusing the other person, you're no longer standing up for yourself. You're redirecting the focus. And if you can redirect it off yourself, that is usually a more passive, feminine role. Remember, masculine is the action taker, the risk taker. They take steps to honor themselves, where feminine is a more passive energy, a more neutral energy. So you stand up with that masculine energy and you say those I feel statements. I feel disrespected when you say that. But try not to jump into accuse mode, where you're pointing the finger saying, you always do this. You're the problem. You're the one who's ruining this relationship. You. All those you statements are you pointing the finger, so you don't have to concentrate on yourself, where the masculine energy is needed so that you can start building it inside of you. True strength comes from honoring yourself, not accusing someone else. Now, again, both men and women should use this masculine aspect because it actually reinforces both the feminine and the masculine inside of you. And whatever role that you want to embrace or that you are embracing will strengthen. This is the beauty of masculine and feminine. You'll get to a point where they're fairly balanced as long as you're doing more of what you lack, if that makes sense. If you lack physical strength, you work out to gain muscle. If you lack emotional strength, you practice honoring yourself. The hardest part for most people is dealing with the consequences of honoring themselves. What they don't realize is that by honoring themselves, they'll get more of what they want more often. The consequences you fear are usually amplified by the excuses you create to avoid doing what's right for you. I had to write that one down too. The consequences that you fear are usually amplified by the excuses that you create to avoid doing what's right for you. What does that mean? That means don't make excuses and just do what's right for you. Otherwise, the consequences are worse. Another step to becoming more masculine is to adopt a calm, assertive energy. This is something Cesar Millan, he's the dog whisperer, teaches about raising dogs in your home or anywhere. A dog looks for a pack leader. He finds the one with the most calm, assertive energy. A dog wants structure and discipline so that he or she can feel comfortable being a dog. Now, what that means for people is that we're the same way. When you find someone who feels comfortable in their own skin, you feel comfortable being around them. A feminine person will be able to embrace their feminine nature more when they're around a calm, assertive person. Assertion is what happens when you aren't afraid to say what's on your mind, but in a calm way that isn't relying on aggression to express it. Calm, assertive energy is a highly sought-after masculine trait, and it's something that you should aspire to if you want to learn to be more masculine. I think a good example of calm, assertive energy is when you're getting offered something at a store, like an extended warranty, and they're really pushy, saying, you really need this. You can replace it if it breaks down in 6 months. You really need this extended warranty. And you have questions going on in your mind. Should I get it? It's another $50 or $100. And then you realize, this is making me feel uncomfortable. So you bring on that calm, assertive energy and you say, no, thanks. I don't want that. And then they'll go, oh, but what if this happens? No, that's okay. I don't want that. I don't need that. If it breaks down, that's fine. I'll deal with it then. And what can they say? You're calm, you're assertive, and if they keep going on after that, then maybe you should just walk away because that's not right. Then when they're trying to convince you of something and you've already said no, the more calm, the more assertive, they'll just see that you're confident. And that's really what it looks like. You're confident, and it's an authentic confidence. All right, the last step that I want to talk about to masculinity is one that I've already addressed, and it has to do with fearing the consequences when you stand up for yourself. I went through my first long-term relationship accepting the invalidation of my emotions. I would, quote, lose every argument because everything she said made sense. The problem was not that I was wrong, but that I was invalidated. Invalidation is when you feel that your emotions don't matter, that you don't matter to the other person. They can be, quote, right about everything, but when you aren't acknowledged for your importance in their life, when your emotions aren't taken into account, you feel both wrong and insignificant. So here's what I'll tell you. You need to learn to accept the consequences for standing up for what you feel is right. It doesn't mean you stand up for everything every time, but you do take a stand when a personal boundary is violated. A good example of this is when my last girlfriend was yelling at me about something. I forget about what, but I usually let someone vent when they need to vent. But it got to a point where I had to stand up and say something like, okay, you need to back off. There's no need to yell when we can talk about this. I said it in a very calm, assertive tone. Now, when she was yelling, she was coming from a very fearful place. There was something she was yelling about that she just had to get off her chest. And by yelling, it kind of gave her strength. But in reality, it was coming from a fearful place, because otherwise she wouldn't be so emotionally charged by it. That's an educated guess, of course, but that's what I believe what was happening. And it helped. She did calm down, and she realized, okay, good. And this is what I believe happened, is that when I put on this calm, assertive energy and say, you need to back off, she took it almost as a command to her subconscious mind, and she felt safe. And that's very important, especially in relationships. When you can help your partner feel safe around you, everything goes a lot smoother. It took her from fear to, I'm listening. I'm still on my guard, but I'm listening. And that's a great place to be for a real conversation to take place. Now, another thing about relationships, if you're with someone who is lying to you or avoiding you or holding out love for you, they probably don't feel safe being themselves with you. When I was more feminine, my wife, when I was married, didn't feel feminine. So she couldn't embrace the woman that she really wanted to be. She wanted to be feminine, but because I was already filling that role, she couldn't be, at least not without some conflict in the relationship. She couldn't feel safe around me because she couldn't let her guard down. The feminine aspect is a place where you can let your guard down because the masculine aspect takes over. This can happen in yourself too. I have a feminine aspect of my personality that lets its guard down. And I do that because I know that I can kick in that masculine strength to stand up for myself. And I am comfortable embracing both aspects of myself. And I've learned to embrace more of the masculine side now that I'm in a relationship so that I can help my girlfriend feel more feminine so she doesn't have to take on so much. It's like back to Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. He says that when dogs are not given that calm, assertive energy in a pack leader, they tend to go neurotic because they'll end up taking on the leadership role themselves. So when you're not home, he barks all the time, or he pees on the carpet, or he's nippy with people, or he's barking at people or barking at other dogs. And he's just neurotic because he wants to be a dog, but he has to be the leader because he needs to take care of the house. He needs to watch the pack. But when he's able to let his guard down because there's a calm, assertive energy in the house, he can be a dog again. And I hate to equate humans with dogs, and especially my ex-wife or my girlfriend, but it's really similar on how this works. Because even my feminine aspect lets its guard down. I let my guard down. And I do that because I feel safe. I feel like there is structure in my life. If it's not from my masculine side, it's from my girlfriend's masculine side. And we complement each other's aspects and energies. And anyway, back to consequence. When you know the consequence of your actions, by embracing the masculine side or embracing the feminine side, do things anyway, because you may be afraid of the consequences of honoring your boundaries, but do them anyway. Most of the time, what you think will happen doesn't. And especially standing up for yourself is admirable and will be respected as you build this inside of yourself. Now I'm talking directly to the letter writer who wants to build his masculinity. Stand up for yourself. Don't cower or swallow your emotions because that's very unhealthy. It'll lead to unhealthy relationships and sometimes even physical illness. Learning to be more masculine is really all about asking for what you want with love and compassion. It's about coming to a comfortable place inside yourself where you confidently say yes and no without fear. And what do you do to conquer fear? You start with the small things first and then graduate to larger things. I conquered fear by learning to say what I felt and just waited for the results. It was risky. I remember the first time I had to conquer a big fear of confrontation. but I knew I had to conquer it because I just couldn't confront anyone about anything. But I told the story about a year ago, but let me tell you again. I used to work for this company, and we were all in a meeting. We were on this round table meeting, and our boss was very assertive, very masculine, but sort of domineering and controlling. And I was getting uncomfortable because he would go around asking people what we're doing to help sell the product. And he asked in a way that made me feel insignificant. He did this with everyone. He asked in a way that accused them of not doing their job, when I know in my heart that we were all doing everything we can to make this product that he had a success. But to be chastised or looked down upon when he went around the room and pointed his finger at us, it felt bad. And I was waiting to be called on. He was calling in other people, and they were saying, oh, I guess I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll help sell the product this way. But when he came to me, I spoke up and said, I'm going to do this to help sell the product. And then he said, why? Why will you do that? And I was like, so you'll stop yelling at us? Insert cricket noise there. And he kind of let it go and said, oh, you think I'm yelling at you? And then he went to the next person. And it was at that point, my heart was racing because I knew I was going to say what I was going to say. But after that point, I got strength. I didn't get fired. I got talked to later by my supervisor, and I did acquiesce a little bit and apologize. But at the same time, it got me past that hurdle of confrontation. Now, I could have gotten fired, but I knew that I was ready to face the consequence of that because it was more important to me to be authentic, and that felt good. I knew if I could pass this hurdle, then I could become more authentic in myself, in my soul. So that was a turning point. That was a pivotal moment for me to face a fear. It was a big one. I should have started smaller, but I was in the moment. It was perfect. And I just remember going, all right, I need to stand up because I feel insignificant. I feel invalidated. I feel like my boundaries are being crossed. All these feelings came up. And instead of worrying about keeping my job and keeping a paycheck, I decided to stand up for myself. And it worked out great. I don't know if you've heard the original episode where I talked about this, but later on, that day and the next day, employees were coming up to me going, I am so glad you stood up to him. And that felt good. I just felt so powerful at that moment because my coworkers felt the same way, but none of them wanted to say it. And I just felt so good standing up and saying that. Again, I could have gotten fired. I don't recommend that you do this. But if you want to, then go for it. I'm not going to stop you. It certainly helped me and changed my life. I didn't end up working there for much longer, but I decided to leave. It was voluntary, but it definitely changed my life and how I went forward in my career, in my relationships, and everything else. A big moment for me. And if you've never done anything like that and need to work on your confrontation, do something small and work your way up, or just step right in like I did and see what happens. Again, I'm not telling you to do that because anything could happen, but I was willing to go through the process and face the consequence no matter what. And let me wrap this segment up. To the letter writer or anyone listening, listen to the episode on embracing both your masculine and feminine aspects of yourself. You can go to theoverwhelmed.com/masculine-feminine. That dash is the little minus sign, the hyphen. Masculine-feminine. I believe that everyone should embrace both aspects of themselves for a more fulfilling, balanced life. Relationships tend to work out better when you figure out which role your partner is most comfortable in, and then you adopt the other role if you're comfortable with that. It doesn't mean you negate the other aspect of yourself. You just strengthen the one that is less emphasized. A woman who is strong and independent and really loves the masculine side of her may want a more passive feminine man. But I've also met strong, independent women who desired to be with a strong, independent man so that she could finally let her guard down. This is like the dog without a pack leader who has to become the pack leader because no one else will take the role. The dog gets neurotic. Again, I apologize about the comparison. But sometimes the person who wants to embrace the aspect of themselves who can't embrace that aspect stays in a heightened mode of alertness, of defensiveness. Like the strong, independent woman who wants to be more feminine can't embrace that role until she feels safe with a masculine energy. She feels secure with that masculine energy. And again, this works for any couples, man and woman, man and man, woman and woman. Usually there's a feminine and a masculine aspect that complement each other. And when you learn to embrace both and learn which one to emphasize in your relationship, you'll remove the conflict in the relationship and inside yourself. Let's move on to the next segment, News and You. All right, this is interesting and kind of unusual for a personal growth show, but you'll see where I'm going in a second. In July of this year, the New Horizons spacecraft captured detailed images of Pluto for the first time in our history. Now, I just saw those pictures last week, and regardless of how you feel about astronomy and dead-looking moons and planets, the fact that we're able to see a planet, even if just a dwarf planet like Pluto, is just phenomenal. But that's not what I'm most awed by from this story. What this does, what this discovery does, is remind us that the universe is full of so much more discovery. The thing is, we tend to take our box of knowledge with us everywhere we go. But how often are we open to new thoughts and beliefs? How often do you open that box and take something that you used to believe out and then replace it with something else that you now believe? Are you even open at all? I want to play you a clip. I've played this on the show before, and you can find it on YouTube. It's Dr. David Eagleman. He's a neuroscientist, and he's been studying all kinds of things with the brain. But he has this TED Talk that talks about the stuff we don't know that we don't know. And it gets into a pretty deep perspective of how we don't know what we don't know and why we don't know what we don't know, and what we can do to expand our perception of the world and open our mind to what could be and what is possible. Let me play that clip now. This is Dr. David Eagleman.
By a show of hands, how many people know what the deep field observation is by the Hubble telescope? How many people have heard of that experiment? Okay, a few. Okay, in 2003, NASA decided that it was going to take the Hubble telescope and it was going to point it at a little dark patch of sky. So it had already done a low-resolution map of the cosmos. And what they wanted to see is, what if we took this finely honed lens and we find a little patch of sky about the size of a pencil tip at arm's length, where there's nothing there, and we point it there for a really long time? Would we be able to see a star there where it looks like there's nothing? So what they did, starting in 2003, is every time the Hubble came around the Earth, they pointed the lens there for 20 minutes to collect any lonely photons trickling in from the distant reaches of the universe. And they did this 400 times. And in the end, they took all of this data and they compiled it, and they put together what was there in that little patch of space. And they didn't find a star. What they found were 10,000 galaxies. A galaxy contains 100 billion stars. So that's 1,000 trillion stars that are all just like our sun, right? And they have innumerable solar systems and planets going around and life forms that we can't even imagine. That's what's teeming behind this little patch of black space. Now, if you mapped out the whole cosmos at that resolution, it would take 1 million years. So I think this is a really good consciousness raiser to start thinking about the size, the enormity of the mysteries that surround us. So I've spent my entire life in science.
I love that clip. And it was so great to hear it again because it just expands my mind every time I hear it. I had to cut it short because it was just too long, but I want you to look him up. Dr. David Eagleman. It's a TEDx talk in Houston that he did about 4 years ago. You'll love it. So, what I take from that is what you believe to be what you know doesn't even scratch the surface of what you don't know you don't know. For example, yesterday, I wondered how much more to life there is beyond our 5 major senses and many other internal and external physical senses that we all have. I mean, many of us can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. But we can also sense when we're not balanced. We can also determine varying degrees of heat and cold, or variations in pressure. How about feeling itchy? That's a distinct sense on its own. Now, did you get itchy when I mentioned that? And if so, why? What sense was that? Yesterday, I was wondering what other experiences we will never have because we haven't developed a sense for it. And that expanded my mind and awareness. This is a great meditation. If you ever want to know how to meditate, ponder upon this question. If there was another sense that no one knew about, what would it be? And what would the experience be like if we had it? There is more to life than we'll ever know. So the idea is to keep our minds open. Be a critical thinker so that you're always questioning. But don't be afraid to develop and stick with a belief system. I always say use what works. If you believe in something, keep believing it until it's time to change your belief system. The hardest part people have is adhering to a belief system 100% until that belief system no longer serves them. I started out this segment talking about Pluto. Scientists saw the first detailed images of the surface of Pluto, and they got confused. You'd think that they'd know exactly what to expect, but they were confused. There were patterns on Pluto that they couldn't explain. If astronomers who've been studying planets and the universe for years are scratching their head about the texture of a planet, then what makes any one of us adopt an infallible, immutable belief system with no room for an alternate opinion? Whatever you believe, yes, believe in it with all your heart and soul, and be open to changing that belief when it's time. When you are this rigid and flexible at the same time, you adapt and evolve with everything that comes your way. We are at an hour and we don't have time for another segment. The segment, What's on My Mind Right Now, will have to wait till next week. So we're going to start wrapping up the show now. And before we close the show, I just want to remind you that I do offer one-on-one coaching. If you go to theoverwhelmedbrain.com and click on Coach with Paul, you'll be able to get all your questions answered there. But just real quick, if you are stuck in a situation that you just don't know the way out of, or you can't get beyond an emotional block inside of you, whether that's you get emotionally triggered when so-and-so does such and such, or maybe you're stuck in a place in life that you don't want to be at, and you just need that extra perspective to get you out of that place, to get you out of that stagnation. I know what it's like. I've been there. And I went through a lot of my own personal healing and growth, and I can help you get to a place that is more fulfilling and more satisfying. A place where you actually can enjoy life, or at least not be so stressed out about it. Visit theoverwhelmedbrain.com and click on Coach with Paul, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions that you may have. I look forward to talking with you soon. And I want to thank you for listening to another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. I thank everyone who has purchased a book or a worksheet, left a review in iTunes or Amazon, or used the Amazon link to shop as you normally would, which gives us pennies for every dollar you spend. I love giving you everything I know every week, and I want to be there for you whenever I can. So if you'd like to give back, just stop by the website and take a look. I've got the donate button, I've got the Amazon button, and there's other ways to give back, but I make it easy to return the kindness. I also want to thank Asha. She's an independent associate for Legal Shield. Visit the getoutofthemess.com website, which will send you to the main site where they'll know we sent you. And tell Asha I said hi. Now, I'd like to end today's episode reminding you that there is more to know than you think there is. Because when you don't know what you don't know, your mind will expand and allow more thoughts and ideas in, even if you're already comfortable with what you know. In other words, there is always something more out there. If you ever feel that you have all these problems in your life and you feel like there's nothing beyond what you experience, remember that tiny black part of space that Dr. Eagleman talked about. Astronomers thought they'd maybe see a star or two beyond that point, but what they saw was 10,000 galaxies. 10,000 galaxies. A galaxy is billions of stars, some smaller than our sun and some others so large that it's inconceivable. Is there life on other planets? Heck, we're still trying to figure out if there's life on Mars. It may not be advanced life, but like the way we see ourselves, but life is life. And if you're maybe too religious to believe about the possibility of life on other planets, just remember that our brains weren't here billions of years ago, and they won't be here billions of years from now. So if you took your brain out of the equation of thought, which makes up your truths, then maybe, just maybe, you leave the door to possibility open enough, just enough to soak in what might be. And when you can let in just a sliver of light of what might or could be, you let in more resources, more answers, more ideas, and quite possibly more truth. I used to live in the box of knowledge, knowing what I knew. But when I opened the box and let experiences and ideas and other stuff in that I'd closed off for so long, my mind laid the path to new wisdom. This is what I want for you. New wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience. Experience comes from making mistakes. But new wisdom comes from being open to being wrong about what you know to be true. When you're open to being wrong about what you know to be true, then you are open to new wisdom. That doesn't mean you don't believe what you believe now. It just means you believe what you know to be true until new evidence comes along that gives you an opportunity to believe something else. Stagnation comes from keeping your mind closed to new ideas. So open that mind and step into your power so you can be firm in your decisions and actions. And this will help you create the life you want. When you do this, you'll discover something I already know to be true about you. And it's not that you're gaining new wisdom. It's that you are already in a place where new wisdom grows inside of you every day. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to evolve. or listen to shows like this. And because you want to evolve your thinking, your consciousness, and your awareness, this proves to me that you are already evolving. You are powerful beyond measure. And above all, you are amazing.